Given that the box office metrics for the Fantastic Four First Steps by both Marvel and Disney is currently sitting at $249 million worldwide, that's global metrics by the way, whereas that Marvel and Disney, they are doing something very similar with the Fantastic Four, much like what they are doing right now with Ironheart, what they did with Snow White, as well as what they did with the Acolyte series back in June of 2024, and well, a lot of this has to do with the financial cutbacks and the financial collapse surrounding the Fantastic Four First Steps.
So these are 6 woke points that are all in this movie, which makes this movie fully woke. It's not just like one thing. They were like, yeah, they did this, but no, it's fully there.
5th, and ahead of its release date, they've been actually going into a lot of problems between both Marvel Studios and the Walt Disney Company, between the test screenings labeled as lackluster, and the reshoots labeled as problematic. There's been a lot of pushback going against this film as well. There's a lot of Marvel fans that aren't quite fond of the fact that they are using Shala Bal, the female Silver Surfer.
So, the question is, can a movie be woke and good? The majority of the time, no. The majority of the time, everything woke turns to shit. So, we'll see.
And shoehorning it into the press tour for Fantastic Four. However, with the Walt Disney Company and Marvel Studios still struggling over the Fantastic Four test screening failures, along with the problematic reshoots, Pedro is only making matters worse the more times he fires back at the critics and fans. A lot of pushback going against this film as well. There's a lot of Marvel fans that aren't quite fond of the fact that they are using Shala Bal, the female Silver Surfer played by Julia Garner, well above the character of Norrin Radd, and that's just one thing. We also know that Pedro Pascal and his politics are not helping, and it's only getting worse from this point. With Pedro Pascal making some of the worst decisions during the press tour for Fantastic Four, one major development going on now involves how he yet again attacked fans and said some of the most offensive things yet toward Marvel fans that is already creating a division ahead of the release on July 25th. Pedro delivered the following that are just really beginning to actually have a lot of Marvel fatigue and Pedro Pascal fatigue. That is very much real. And like I said earlier, his politics, his overall view on activism, it is not helping at all in the least when it comes down to Marvel and Disney. And the fact that Marvel and Disney allows him to go on that train wreck of viewing, of course, or spewing his politics into the public eye, it goes to show you that they really don't care at all. However, with the Walt Disney Company and Marvel Studios still struggling over the Fantastic Four test screening failures, along with the problematic reshoots, Pedro is only making matters worse the more times he fires back at the critics and fans. Now, Pedro recently delivered the following in a very defensive way that made things worse. I would definitely say that I'm a proud male feminist, activist, and one that defends LGBTQ rights, and most certainly diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you know, like all of those important things that belong to stay in this industry.
Marvel and Disney are doing it again, and it's not working. Just like Ironheart, just like the Acolyte, and yes, just like Snow White, they've built Fantastic Four, first steps on a familiar formula, identity-first marketing, rushed scripts, and controversy-laced casting. And now, the box office just confirmed what audiences already suspected: another Marvel misfire. We're looking at a 66% second weekend collapse, with final projections hovering around just $500 to $550 million globally. That's below Superman, below How to Train Your Dragon, and possibly even below F1. Remember, this was supposed to be the foundation of Phase 6, but instead of fan hype, we got Pedro Pascal crying in interviews, talking about daddies in the MCU, political anxiety, and a full-on cultural rant. MAGA this, Trump that. Suddenly, a press tour became a monologue. And that's when Marvel lost control of the narrative. Disney's silence? Deafening. Kevin Feige's DEI commitment? Just added fuel to the fire. If you've been watching this channel, you know we've been connecting the dots for months. But now we have receipts, we have numbers, and we have backlash. So let's break it down. How the drama, the politics, and the press chaos turned one of Marvel's biggest bets into one of its biggest embarrassments. The initial buzz around Fantastic Four, first steps might have looked decent on paper. A global opening north of $117 million? That should have been a win.
And whether or not newly released films are going to cut into those box office metrics, that's really up for discussion right now. And also whether or not the box office for Fantastic Four First Steps will be very similar to what Brave New World turned out to be once it actually made its course throughout all theaters.
But what followed was a brutal reality check. Just 1 week later, the film suffered a jaw-dropping 66% second weekend drop, shrinking to a $40 million domestic frame, and leaving the global total stalled at around $368 million. And this isn't just some fluke dip. It's officially one of the worst sophomore declines for any Marvel movie to date. To give you a comparison, even Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, held on stronger than this, and that one was shredded by both fans and critics alike. Meanwhile, Pedro Pascal's debut as Reed Richards was supposed to reinvigorate the brand. Instead, it's confirming something Marvel's been trying to deny since Phase 4 began. Audiences are checking out. Even the Marvels, which took heat from day one, performed with a slightly less severe second-week drop. And what makes this sting even more is the timing. Right now, Superman is pulling ahead in almost every market. It's projected to finish with at least $100 million more than Fantastic Four globally. And we haven't even factored in the merchandise disaster. There's no demand for Fantastic Four action figures, no viral Halloween buzz, no Daddy Pedro toys flying off shelves. Compare that to the nostalgia-fueled Deadpool and Wolverine, which hasn't even released yet and is already dominating pre-orders. What Disney was banking on as a Phase 6 anchor is rapidly turning into another data point in a disturbing trend. But the numbers are just the start, because what really made things spiral wasn't the film itself, it was the man leading the press tour. And what Pedro Pascal said next, it changed everything. What should have been a standard, well-orchestrated Marvel press run quickly unraveled into one of the most bizarre media moments of the year. And it all centered around Pedro Pascal. It started with a few emotional interviews. Pascal, visibly shaken, began speaking not about his character or the film, but about politics. He declared himself a proud male feminist and a daddy in the Marvel universe. That alone might have sparked some memes, but then things took a serious turn. In one clip that quickly went viral, Pedro teared up mid-sentence while talking about the state of the country, claiming, "Cinema is dying under President Trump." He wasn't done there.
Is also another big conversation going on right now. But one thing that's for certain is that Pedro Pascal getting involved and way too involved in politics, it's not really helping the situation at all when it comes to the press tour for the Fantastic Four.
Pascal went on to blame MAGA supporters for boycotting Fantastic Four, saying they were attacking freedom of expression and had a vendetta against Hollywood itself. "They're the reason our numbers are lower," he said. "I don't want their support. I don't want their money." Almost instantly, that soundbite exploded across the internet. Now Marvel has seen its fair share of off-script moments during press tours. Brie Larson? Anyone? But this? This was next level. Pascal didn't just make a political statement. He turned the Fantastic Four rollout into an emotional, politically charged monologue that completely overshadowed the film itself. And for many fans, it was just exhausting. The comment sections lit up. Some applauded his honesty, while others called it narcissistic and divisive. Even neutral viewers were confused. Why was the actor meant to introduce Marvel's most iconic superhero team using airtime to cry about Trump? It became painfully clear. Pedro's daddy energy wasn't helping. It was hijacking the movie. And while social media spiraled into chaos, Disney and Marvel, they said nothing. But silence doesn't equal safety. Because behind the scenes, the damage was already being done, and the fans were starting to walk away. As Pedro Pascal's interviews went viral for all the wrong reasons, something strange started happening in theaters across the country. They began to empty. Even for a Marvel film, the drop-off was sharper than expected. Fans weren't just skipping second viewings, they were skipping entirely. And this wasn't limited to one political camp or a few angry posts on Reddit. Longtime Marvel loyalists, people who stuck around through Multiverse of Madness, Eternals, and even Secret Invasion, started to say the quiet part out loud. They were tired of being talked at, not entertained. The fan reaction to Pascal's "I don't want MAGA people watching this movie" comment was especially damaging. Even those who didn't identify with the label felt alienated. As one viral tweet put it, "I just wanted to see Reed Richards stretch his arms. not watch a CNN monologue. Others were more blunt.
Is that he's really beginning to actually follow Pedro Pascal's steps of continuing to go against MAGA Republicans out there and really making things worse and dividing the audience.
When the actor cries more than the audience, you know it's bad. But beyond the memes and politics, there was something deeper going on, a trust gap. People didn't trust Marvel anymore to deliver escapism. And instead of rebooting one of their most iconic franchises with a bang, they launched it under a cloud of controversy and identity confusion. This was supposed to be Marvel's clean slate, a new cast, a new beginning, a new chapter for Phase 6. Instead, the conversation became all about daddies, politics, anxiety, and cultural division. The movie itself? Forgotten. And when you lose your audience's focus before they even walk into the theater, you've already lost the battle. Because this wasn't just a bad box office weekend. It was a sign that Marvel's most loyal viewers are looking elsewhere. And they're not coming back just because Kevin Feige says, trust the plan. But while fans checked out, the silence from Marvel Studios only grew louder. And that silence started raising even more questions. For a studio known for its obsessive control over marketing, the silence from Disney and Marvel following the Pedro Pascal controversy was almost deafening. No statements, no clarifications, no course corrections. Kevin Feige, who's normally quick to redirect the narrative, said nothing. And that silence sent a very loud message. They were either unprepared or unwilling to confront the fallout. But here's what makes it even more puzzling. Just 2 weeks before this press tour went sideways, Feige doubled down on Marvel's commitment to DEI in a public Q&A, saying that diversity was non-negotiable and essential to the future of the MCU. Bob Iger echoed similar sentiments in a shareholder call, even as questions swirled about declining performance. So, while Marvel fans were asking for better writing, stronger stories, and less division, the studio was clinging to buzzwords and corporate slogans. And that disconnect? It's hurting them. Instead of addressing the real concerns, casting controversies, rushed storytelling, weak villain arcs, Marvel is pretending everything is fine, as if the Marvels, Quantumania, and now Fantastic Four are just outliers in an otherwise winning strategy. But the box office doesn't lie. Neither do second-week drops of 66%.
Fantastic. The problem that I have, and that I always have with MAGA folks, is that they never even admit when they are wrong, especially when it comes to their argument and debates on what they call wokeism.
And behind the scenes, industry insiders say the panic is very real. Internal projections had Fantastic Four landing somewhere near $750 million globally. Now, they're adjusting expectations down to $500 to $550 million, and that's being optimistic. Even worse, ancillary revenue. The stuff Disney usually banks on like toys, streaming, and theme park tie-ins looks dead on arrival. There are no Pedro Pascal Mr. Fantastic dolls flying off shelves, no excited Halloween costume buzz, just awkward silence and uncomfortable memes. And that's the thing. When your movie becomes a punchline before it finishes its second weekend, and your lead actor is more known for crying on camera than the role he's playing, you don't just have a publicity problem. You have a branding crisis, and Marvel may not survive another one of those. But what if this isn't about one movie at all? What if this is just the next chapter in a bigger collapse? One that started years ago. If there's one thing that became obvious after Fantastic Four's second week plunge, it's this. This wasn't a one-off. This is the pattern. Ever since Avengers Endgame wrapped up the Infinity Saga in 2019, Marvel has been stumbling through what can only be described as a creative identity crisis. Sure, there have been bright spots. Spider-Man, No Way Home, and Guardians 3 still held the line, but in between those hits was a wave of forgettable, front-loaded films that audiences didn't care to revisit. And now, Fantastic Four. First Steps is joining that list. Eternals, Ant-Man, and the Wasp. Quantumania, The Marvels, Shang-Chi, Doctor Strange 2. They all had one thing in common. Strong openings followed by massive drops. Not because superhero fatigue is real, but because audiences don't trust Marvel anymore. Post-Endgame, Marvel stopped selling stories. They started selling statements. And instead of giving fans new heroes to root for, they gave them characters defined more by their identity checkboxes than their arcs. That shift didn't go unnoticed. Viewers aren't dumb. They can tell when the story is secondary, and they've been voting with their wallets ever since. Now throw Fantastic Four into that mix, a franchise that should have been a guaranteed slam dunk, and it becomes even clearer. The blueprint is broken. Because it's not that fans don't want new characters. They just want characters who feel earned, who matter, who inspire. And instead, they got Pascal's Reed Richards, a version so disconnected from audience expectations, it sparked backlash before the movie even released. It's not superhero fatigue, it's Marvel fatigue. And unless something changes soon, Deadpool and Wolverine might end up as Marvel's last gasp before the House of Cards fully collapses. But one of the strangest parts of all this is how Pedro Pascal's carefully cultivated daddy image didn't just backfire, it became part of the collapse itself.
And look, I am so proud of what Kevin Feige is doing here at Marvel Studios, and what Disney is putting together to continue our efforts with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Typical MAGA Republicans will just immediately label that as some form of an agenda to make an argument or to create a talking point on their end to make them sound logical.
At one point, Pedro Pascal's daddy image was everywhere. He wasn't just a leading man, he was the internet's favorite father figure. Between The Mandalorian and The Last of Us, social media couldn't get enough of his tired eyes, calm voice, and effortlessly cool demeanor. But what started as an organic, fan-driven meme turned into Marvel's weirdest marketing crutch. During the Fantastic Four press tour, Pascal leaned fully into the persona. He referred to himself as a daddy, joked that Dr. Doom is a daddy, even claimed Tony Stark was one too. And instead of connecting with audiences, it started making them squirm. What was once funny suddenly felt forced. The more Pascal talked, the more detached he felt from Reed Richards, a character meant to be a genius-level strategist, not someone riffing on TikTok energy in interviews. And fans noticed. Instead of seeing Marvel's new leading man step into an iconic role with gravitas, they got a press tour built on inside jokes and identity soundbites. Worse, Pascal's emotional breakdowns, tearing up on camera, talking about anxiety and politics, clashed hard with the confident, intellectual tone fans expected from Mr. Fantastic. One second, he was crying about Trump. The next, he was making daddy jokes on stage. The tonal whiplash was unreal. And for general audiences who weren't plugged into the fan culture behind the daddy meme, it was just confusing. To them, Pascal looked unprofessional, unfocused, and kind of cringe. The end result? Viewers didn't connect with him. They didn't show up for him. And when the backlash hit, there was no way to walk it back. Pascal's overexposure had hit critical mass, and his once beloved public image had turned into a marketing liability. And when your leading man becomes the reason people tune out, it's no longer just an actor problem. It's a casting problem, a Marvel problem, a future problem. But now that Marvel's foundation is cracking, what does this mean for Fantastic Four's long-term future? This was supposed to be the crown jewel of Marvel's Phase 6, a fresh reboot, a new era, the one franchise that could carry the MCU forward after the fatigue, the flops, and the forgotten side quests. Instead, it's now the biggest question mark in Marvel's entire roadmap. With projections falling between 500 to 550 million globally, Fantastic Four, First Steps is tracking below even Marvel's mid-tier expectations. That's not just disappointing, it's dangerous. Because this film wasn't just a standalone, it was meant to set up Doom, to anchor crossovers, to bridge timelines for Secret Wars. And now insiders say Marvel is scrambling behind the scenes. There's already chatter about changes for the inevitable sequel. Reshoots may be off the table, but recasting, it's being whispered. Pascal hasn't confirmed his future in the role, and Marvel hasn't either. And with fan petitions gaining steam online, calling for a more faithful Reed.
When they are just stupid. The problem with MAGA is that they are like a virus, and it can be very hard to quiet down the noise coming from these people, that they have an issue with people that come from different ethnicities to take on popular roles. They like to call that race swapping. I see nothing wrong with that.
The pressure is only growing. On the creative side, Marvel is reportedly reviewing their tone. Viewers didn't want a socially conscious, emotionally fragile Reed Richards. They wanted a strategist, a scientist, a leader. And as Disney begins to feel the financial squeeze, especially with Deadpool and Wolverine carrying the full weight of this summer's hopes, executives are already rethinking the entire structure of Phase 6. Some projects may be delayed, others shelved, a few may get the Quantumania treatment, quietly erased from the long-term conversation. Because Fantastic Four wasn't just another test, it was the blueprint. And if that blueprint's cracked, everything Marvel was planning to build on top of it suddenly looks shaky. But let's be honest, Fantastic Four didn't fail because fans weren't ready for change. It failed because the studio misunderstood what kind of change audiences actually wanted. And when Marvel ignores its audience long enough, they tend to disappear. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one at Marvel or Disney wants to say out loud. Fantastic Four didn't just stumble, it exposed a much deeper problem. And the cracks go way beyond Pedro Pascal or one bad press tour. This was Marvel's moment to prove they still had it. A clean slate, an iconic franchise, a golden opportunity to win back fans who'd been drifting ever since Endgame. Instead, they gave us a film built on fragile messaging, cast controversy, and confused priorities. And when it failed to land, they stayed quiet. That silence, it's not strength, it's fear. Because Fantastic Four is now the latest in a growing list of projects that opened big, collapsed fast, and left no cultural footprint behind. And this time, it wasn't just critics or trolls pointing it out, it was their own fan base. Even diehard Marvel supporters are starting to admit it. This isn't the MCU we fell in love with. And look, this isn't about rooting for failure. Most fans want Marvel to succeed. But success doesn't come from pretending everything is fine. It doesn't come from leaning on viral sound bites and calling it marketing. It comes from listening, from course correcting, from putting the story first again. Marvel isn't struggling because people are tired of superheroes. It's struggling because people are tired of feeling like an afterthought. When you've got billion-dollar properties falling short, actors crying on camera instead of hyping the movie, and audiences openly skipping your biggest releases. It's time to stop blaming fatigue or fans. It's time to fix the foundation. And if Deadpool and Wolverine can't hold the line this summer, Marvel won't just have a PR crisis on their hands, they'll have a full-on collapse. Because here's the real danger. When your fans stop caring, they don't come back. Not for the next phase, not for the next hero, not even for nostalgia. And unless something changes, fast, Marvel's future may already be sealed.